We need to talk about Adolescence. It's the new #1 show on Netflix and it is blowing people away. It's a 4-episode limited series about the events that take place following a young boy being arrested. And the thing that is really hooking people into the show is that every episode plays out in one long take in real time. The camera never cuts. If the actors messed up, they would have had to start filming the entire episode from the beginning. And in this video, I'm going to break down what the show is really about, because so many people are missing the point and getting this one wrong. I'll also answer the questions that people have been left with, like what does the ending actually mean? What happened to the characters after the show ended? And where is the knife? I'll also let you in on some backstage secrets, like how many takes each episode took and which lines were improvised, while diving into the key themes and talking about the real issues and the true stories behind this show. If you're new here, I'm Mad Morph. I'm a full-time content creator and this is my channel where I talk about movies and TV, so please like and subscribe for more. You can find my socials, my gaming channel and my podcast where I read you bedtime stories for free in the description below this video. And now let's get into Adolescence Explained. To really get into what this show is about, we need to go right back to the beginning, quite literally, because this show plays out in real time, with the episodes taking place 1 day, 3 days, 3 months, and 13 months after the terrible event. We are left to deduce and put together everything that has happened between these timelines in the lines and the blank spaces from just 50 minutes with these characters in each episode. Let me explain. Episode 1 opens with the police detective Bascom receiving a message from his son asking to take the day off school. He brushes this off and even laughs about his co-worker with it playing the message back to them. This will become important later. The show really gets started when then the police raid this house. They make a point of showing a whole convoy of cars and many armed police kicking this door in and raiding this family. When they get in and get upstairs, they find a 13-year-old boy in bed who is so scared he's wet himself. Is this really who all of this police presence was here for? It's important to note you probably wouldn't have this many police actually raiding a house to arrest a child, but the symbolism is there showing just how dangerous what's inside this house actually is.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
Dad, I haven't done anything!
We then follow as he's arrested, taken away in the police car, and we ride with him all of the way and through processing. This entire first episode focuses on the arrest and the processing and shows us this terrified little boy. A child who's denying he's done anything wrong the entire time, to his father, to everyone around him, crying and turning to ask his dad,
Do you believe me that I've not done anything?
Of course I believe you. You're my son, aren't you?
We even watch and feel sympathy for this kid as he is strip searched by police. We feel sorry for his dad as he just stands there and watches after protesting at first, but being told there's nothing he can do.
Mr. Miller, this is good for James' defence.
It's fine.
You okay?
I don't mind.
The first big emotional beat is us just watching this dad kind of being torn apart in this moment, having to watch police officers examine his child for evidence. We're told about Jamie's fear of needles and his blood is being taken. This has a really important symbolism, but to talk about it you need to know the ending, so I'm going to explain this one later. There's a moment where him and his dad are alone and his dad says,
Did you do it?
No.
Promise.
Promise.
We watch as he's interviewed by the police, with him mostly answering no comment as advised by a lawyer. They begin to present him with piece of evidence after piece of evidence, saying his teachers said he has a problem with his behavior recently, presenting him with his Instagram where he reposts pictures of models and the comments that he makes underneath being aggressive. They lay out that they found his trainers from the night before. They present him with a picture of a 13-year-old girl, Katie Leonard, asking if he knows her. Were they friends? They say she posts comments on your Instagram, so you must be friends, right?
What is she who's dead then?
Why would you ask that? She is, and we think you know that. So it's really clever of you to ask the question if that is the case, don't you think?
His response here really seems to irk the detectives, and they just straight out ask him, did you kill her? Detailing that she was stabbed 7 times all over her body. They even show screenshots from security cameras that show Jamie following Katie on the night that she was murdered and asking him again,
You sure you don't want to tell us what happened? You're going to have to say it sooner or later.
I haven't done anything wrong.
but he just keeps saying, I haven't done anything wrong. Until finally the detectives pull out a laptop and play footage that shows Jamie committing the crime. We literally see him and the girl have the confrontation and him grabbing her and stabbing her. The dad is stunned. He can only stutter his son's name, not able to believe what he is seeing. And what's really fascinating here is that a lot of the audience and viewers were just like the dad. We didn't fully comprehend what we were seeing in this scene. Lots of people saying, I thought they were showing a fight, a confrontation, that he was only hitting her. We, the audience, are just like the father, unable to believe and accept the reality of what we see. The previous hour has set us up to doubt even video evidence on the screen that shows him doing the deed. Through the previous hour, they've set us up as the audience to feel so sorry for this kid that we kind of just can't believe it, just like the dad. With the detective finally saying, give us a reason, do you want to tell us why? This really sets up, not in a subtle way at all, that is what this show is about. It's not a who done it, it's a why done it. Why did he do it? The mystery of did he do it has been solved at the end of the first episode. But there's still the mystery of why he did it to be explained and explored, and its devastating effects in the next 3 episodes. It's been very interesting to see the audience reception to this, because we're so conditioned and almost brainwashed to just be experiencing whodunits and procedural shows all the time, especially on Netflix, that a lot of viewers can't actually accept that we've been told who did it in the first episode. I've seen a lot of comments from people being like, did he do it though, after they've watched all 4 episodes? And the answer is yes, he did it. They told you that in the first episode. It's really part of the artistry and the genius of this show with what comes next, with the episode ending as Jamie's dad starts to cry. Jamie seems completely unable to understand why his dad is upset. His father can only look away from him at first, and keep that in mind because it's going to be important for later.
What have you done? Why?
Before grabbing his son and hugging him as Jamie just continues to say, it wasn't me. The second episode takes place 3 days later, and we follow Detective Bascom at Jamie's school. They're here to ask his friends and fellow students questions, and it's also the school where the detective's son goes. Remember the one that wanted the day off at the very beginning of the show? Here's what's important from this episode. We see a conversation with the 2 friends of Jamie who he spent time with before going to do what he did, one saying his dad's really mad and the other saying his parents really didn't say anything. We see the detective's son being bullied, giving us a reason as to why he may have been pretending to be sick to get off of school. We meet the victim's best friend who is upset and less than helpful as she doesn't really believe in the police, taking out her grief on them, but she lets the police know that Katie and Jamie were not friends. The episode continues as the police speak to teachers and classes, trying to get more info about Jamie and Katie, looking for a motive or trying to find the knife. This school is chaotic. It is unruly. The boys make jokes, they swear, they laugh about what's happened. No one shows any respect for teachers or the police officers. A fire alarm is even set off, causing the school to evacuate and stand outside. It's actually a pretty realistic interpretation of British public schools in certain areas, and I've never seen that powder keg of life represented so well on screen before. Earlier on in episode 1 to his lawyer, Jamie said his favourite lesson is history, but when we go to the history lesson, the teacher isn't even there. He's just stuck a video on for them and gone somewhere else to do something. The history teacher doesn't seem to care and even says the kids are impossible to deal with.
Yeah, but I teach history. I don't see them, you know. When these kids are fucking impossible, I mean, what am I supposed to do?
It's an interesting point that Jamie could have an interest or a fascination with history, but it's not being taught well at this school. Things get out of control when the best friend of the victim punches Ryan, the friend of Jamie, saying, "You murdered my friend." But when the police talk to him, all he can focus on is asking the detective if he was popular with girls when he was young. Ryan revealing he brushes his teeth so carefully because it's important to girls for some reason to have nice teeth. It's our first kind of glimpse into the mentality of these young boys and what they are obsessing over. But the real breakthrough in this episode comes when the detective's own son asks to speak to him and translates the emojis that are in the comments on Instagram. It's important to note in this conversation we get the sense that the detective is an absent father, his son saying,
Adam,
is this... Go, Dad.
I don't want to go.
You want to go gym or work or something?
I'm here.
The door's right there.
Here.
you want to go to the gym, go back to work, the door's right there. He doesn't feel listened to by his father. But eventually he explains that the comments on Insta aren't showing that Katie and Jamie were friends, it's actually bullying. They're emojis and code showing Katie and others calling him an incel, references to red pill culture, the 80-20 rule, the manosphere, and more. His son is pointing out the deeper meaning behind the emojis that kids send each other. An incel is a member of an online community of young men who consider themselves unable to attract women. But when the police want to talk to Ryan again, he runs, but he's eventually caught and confesses to being the one to give Jamie the knife, and he is arrested. This happens pretty much at the end of the episode, and if you can believe it, one of these takes was messed up right here by the detective shouting the wrong kid's name. They had to redo the entire 50-minute episode again from the start, and the guy said he wanted to cry. He felt like he'd let everyone down, and this episode actually took 14 takes to get right. The ending is brilliant as we see the detective talking to his son, simply saying to him, "I'm hungry. I was going to eat and I wanted to know if you wanted to come." But when his son initially resists, he just says, "Look, I've got some free time. I want to spend it with you because I love you." And the boy just says, "Yeah, I can be hungry." They drive off together with him asking his son about his school day, showing how the detective has been inspired to be a more active dad, more present in his son's life after learning what he has today. We are literally seeing a father make a conscious choice to be there more, to be more involved, and to try to combat his son away from falling down this route into this culture. And you then get one of the most amazing shots in the show that has everyone scratching their heads and going, how did they do that? We watch as the best friend of the victim is walking out, the only one not really on her phone as every other child walks with their phones out. And then the camera starts to lift up into the air as somehow they transition to a drone shot. It passes over the entire town with a choir of children singing before arriving at the crime scene. And we see Jamie's dad placing flowers at the site of the murder. They did this by quite literally strapping the camera to a drone and having it take off. It's a really beautiful and poignant scene, and an interesting tidbit is that the female singing voice that closes the episode is the voice of the actress that plays the victim, to give it an even more haunting aspect. The third episode is my favorite episode of the show. It takes place 7 months after the murder. Jamie is being held in a secure training facility waiting for his trial because young offenders institutions are only for kids aged 15 and up, and he's clearly too young for jail. He's visited by a court-appointed psychologist, and this is her 5th visit. She's trying to assess Jamie to give a recommendation to the court and to the judge about his capacity and whether he understands what he has done. A lot of people don't get this episode, and they get its meaning wrong, so let's get into it. She gets Jamie a hot chocolate before going in and puts marshmallows in it. The guard watching says, "You've never added those before, you must mean business." She gives Jamie the hot chocolate and says that she saved him half of her sandwich in case he was hungry. These offerings are not the work of some naive woman trying to take care of a young boy. They're calculated moves by a smart professional trying to get what she needs. Jamie says that he hates pickle sandwiches, and when you think about it, most kids would not want a sandwich with pickle in. I think the sandwich in itself is an attempt to push Jamie's buttons. Would he blame and chastise this woman for bringing him a pickle sandwich? It's about finding out what he expects and thinks of women, as he questions her over and over. No tomatoes, no salad. The sandwich also has some symbolism for later, so keep it in mind. Meanwhile, the hot chocolate with marshmallows in is just as he likes it. And these 2 items are placed on the table in front of him, one on either side like opposing forces. This entire episode is a conversation between Jamie and Bryony, the psychologist, as she questions and assesses him, probing him with questions about his family, his life, and delving deeper into bigger issues, asking about his relationship with his dad's relationship with his dad. They seem to be getting along, smiling and laughing, making small talk as she tries to put Jamie at ease, peppering in questions like, what does it mean to be masculine? Jamie obsesses over what she has written about him, asking again and again if he can read it, and is told no. She probes about whether his dad ever gets angry or not, and he just says he once pulled down a shed. But what's really important from this conversation is the stories about Jamie's dad taking him to play football. Jamie's not very good, and when he would mess up, he would see his dad looking away. He never shouted at him or got mad at him for his mistakes and messing up in the game. He just looked away. He felt like his dad was ashamed of him in those moments. Throw it back to the first episode when his dad sees that footage of what his son has done and he can only look away. He's quite rightly ashamed of his son, and his son knows it. This whole thing will become more relevant in the final episode, so we'll talk about it at the end. Things start to get a bit more intense as Jamie gets annoyed. They're arguing about why he's being held here in this facility, and she tells him to sit down.
Look, I don't fucking want to sit down! You do not tell me when to sit down! Look at me now! control what I do in my life.
Jamie's outburst is a perfect example of the rage that he has in him, incensed by a woman telling him what to do or anyone trying to control him. Seconds later, as she exits for a break, he just says, "Can I have another hot chocolate, please?" He's entirely disconnected from his own outburst. He's asked where he would take a girl on a date. Would there be touching involved? As she just continues to probe him and try to build a picture of how he sees women. He tells a made-up story about an experience with 2 girls before admitting that it's a lie. But he does admit seeing girls in his school from pictures, revenge pictures that were being sent around by the boys. We get reference after reference to actions and things that are happening in schools around the world for this generation that are having a massive impact on them. It turns out that one of the girls in those photos that were shared is Katie, the victim.
He's not going to get any more pictures though, is he? No, she's dead.
He says that he thinks he's ugly, which is a common trait of the incel and how they get sucked into the culture, believing themselves to be ugly and that negative feeling turning into toxicity, hatred, and rage towards women. With Jamie even becoming concerned about whether or not Bryony, this adult psychologist, thinks he's ugly or not.
You don't think you're pretty. You do think I'm ugly.
I haven't passed judgment on either of those things. If you think about it, for very good reason.
Oh, for very good reason.
I want to...
This agitates him to the point of letting this slip.
Whether I understand what I did. No. I didn't say that.
His angry reaction causes a guard to come to the window, who is kind of waved away by Bryony, causing Jamie to react even further.
What was that? Signal him away like a fucking queen, yeah?
I need you to sit down.
He shows his hate for women having any kind of power over a man in this very intense scene, and we see a professional young woman composing herself to continue. This entire episode is an examination of the why. It's a close-up of male rage, the loneliness epidemic, online misogyny, incels, the manosphere, Instagram models, social media, the 80-20 idea. During this conversation, you get references and nods on all of the issues that affect young boys and men in today's world, how it affects them, and the resulting toxic masculinity and that impact that it has on women around the world. It's an uncomfortable episode, and one that some are unfairly judging to be pointing the finger at men. Some have talked and commented on the show as yet another piece of media blaming men, demonizing young boys and showing them to be evil, which completely misses the point and disregards the nuance here. It is showing how messed up this child is by these things. Call it confused, call it brainwashed, call it poisoned, but he has been severely negatively impacted by these experiences. He too is a victim of this culture. So many young boys and men are victims of this culture and of the grifters and influencers who make money by the attention that they get by drumming up this discourse, by cultivating a culture of hate towards women and trapping these boys in this mindset.
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. But I do think they're right about that though.
The show does not demonize Jamie or men. It puts the spotlight on them and the causes of it and the hard conversations that we need to be having. We find out that his friend Tommy is bullied for being poor, that his friend Ryan is bullied for being dumb, that the boys are spat on and called names at school. She shows him the comments that Katie was making on his Instagram, and we get Jamie's side of things, with him revealing that with Katie being the victim of her photo being shared, he thought she would be weak enough and it was the right time to ask her on a date.
I want my best tracksuit I can find, and I just said, "You want to come up the fair?"
And what did she say?
She just laughed and said, "Oh, I'm not that desperate."
At her lowest point, she still rejected him. This is the real motive behind the murder. He couldn't take this final rejection. He focuses in on this, calling her a bitch, saying you can see that she was one, right? He's trying to get the psychologist on his side. He doesn't see really what he did as wrong because of how she treated him. He starts to unravel.
She was a bullying bitch, right? That's the thing. That night, I didn't touch her. I had a knife. She was scared, but I didn't do that. I could have touched any part of her body I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I didn't. A
complete confession to what he did before he calmly takes a bite of the pickle sandwich. The symbolism here is that he has already knocked away the hot chocolate, a symbol of childhood innocence, a sweet thing. Something that kids like, a treat. And here he is after confessing to this terrible, terrible thing, the loss of innocence, the loss of childhood, picking up a bitter, vinegary, pickled sandwich that kids don't like and taking a bite of it. This is all the psychologist needs, and she explains that this is the final session and that he won't be seeing her anymore after this.
Jamie, this is our last session. What? But what I would encourage you to do, whatever.
And Jamie starts to get emotional again, but all he is concerned about as she tries to leave is whether or not she likes him.
Do you like me?
I was here as a professional.
Don't you even like me a bit? What did you think about me then? Decide, come on!
This was really useful.
This is to show how utterly warped his perspective on women has become and how it's all that he is focused on. How this child's brain has been trained to draw all of its value in life from how women see him. And that's why when that value is challenged or demeaned or rejected by a woman, he can't handle it, and he lashes out and he rages, and this is why he did what he did.
Don't you even like me a bit?
Jamie, come on, man, please. Okay? Jamie.
What did you think about me then?
Okay.
Make no mistake, this is pretty much the key point to the entire show and a real problem in society today. It is the core concept of the true stories which inspired this show. To put a very complex issue simply, it is the concept of the fact that young men and boys cannot handle rejection by women. As Jamie is dragged out and taken away, Bryony can finally let her emotions out and try to catch her breath. Her emotions, while partly the relief of letting down that guard of composure that she's had to keep up for the last hour in the face of everything to do her job, the emotions also speak more to the terrifying symbolism of what she has just faced. The magnitude of all of the issues that have surfaced through this conversation. It's not just about her own fear or her own emotions, it's about fearing for the enormity of the task at hand and what young boys and girls are going through, and it makes her sick. She almost vomits as she tries to clear away that half-eaten sandwich. Talking about the significance of the sandwich, Erin Doherty, who played the psychologist Bryony, said that she saw the sandwich as representing her character's hope. That she was hoping to see in this boy something different, and at the end of the episode we witness her have to let go of everything that she wanted the boy to be. That the person who brought the sandwich into the room to make that offer is not the same person who can't even touch it at the end. While some viewers have pointed out that Jamie saying he hates pickles could have been another attempt at manipulation and just more lies. If he hates pickles so much, why would he then eat the sandwich at the end? Was he trying to manipulate Bryony and make a woman feel bad for him by saying he didn't like them at the beginning, like she had messed up as a way to sort of exert power and control over her? If I make her feel bad for bringing me the wrong sandwich or something that I hate, she might be nicer to me. Was he lying to Bryony the whole time? And what does the sandwich really mean? Let me know in a comment. The episode is a masterpiece, and even if you don't watch this show in full, you should watch episode 3 from start to finish. It's the kind of writing and acting that could stand alone in an hour on stage in a play all on its own. The final episode takes place 13 months after the murder, with the trial about to take place, and this episode focuses on Jamie's family, showing the devastating effects of what has happened. Of course, many shows in the past have focused on the victims' families, and it's not often you see the killer's family being represented. This entire show is about showing all sides and how the culture is like a nuclear bomb, destroying everything and everyone, and no one is safe from it. No one is blameless, and at the same time, they are all victims. It's important that this episode focuses on the family because we're going to be examining why Jamie turned out the way that he did. The episode opens with Eddie opening a shed, a reference maybe to him having torn down a shed once in his greatest fit of rage that his child saw, and he looks at his kid's bike hanging up in the shed, a moment of longing for the innocent kid his son once was, remembering him being small and riding it around, and now things are the way that they are. This episode takes place on his birthday. 50 years old today, he tries to get flirty with his wife as she makes breakfast, but is gently rebuffed and told to wait for later. The episode centers on someone having vandalized his van, misspelling the word nonce in graffiti on it, which in British terms is someone who messes around with kids, if you know what I mean. We find out that the family have been subject off and on to different acts of vandalism and abuse over the last 13 months for being the family of the killer Jamie. The graffiti doesn't come off with soap and a sponge, so they have to go to buy paint. There is then a very long scene and conversation with the dad, the sister, and the mum talking about what they're going to do later and what dating was like when they were growing up. They plan to go to the cinema and out for food once they get back, and the conversation reveals that the mum and the dad are in therapy dealing with the effect of what has happened. The story about their past is how everyone laughed at the dad at a school disco for falling over when dancing in front of everyone. It's the night that him and the wife started to see each other. They're able to joke and laugh about it, and it's showing that he can laugh at himself, even though the school never let him forget about it and made fun of him for it for years. He's just trying to buy the paint, and he gets recognized as being Jamie's dad, but this time it has this odd positive reaction.
I've seen the photos of her. You know, so you've got my support.
Can you just get me the paint, please, mate?
You should get me a good lawyer, that's what I think. You know, if you crowdfund it, there's lots of us that get behind it.
This weird kid is clearly part of the incel culture and is kind of outing himself as such when he says that he and others stand with Jamie, showing us how for some there is no sympathy for the victims and how they blame them for what happened. This boy represents them. He represents everyone who comments on posts and videos about this show saying that it was the girl's fault for bullying Jamie. Eddie just wants to get the paint and get out of there. His mood entirely changed, realizing there's no escaping this thing that is following them around. But then we get a bit of an insight into who Eddie is as he sees the kids who vandalized his van and rode by calling him a name earlier.
Hey, is it funny? Don't smile, kid, because I'll slap that smile off your face. Don't laugh at me, boy. Don't laugh at me. Don't laugh at me.
His temper gets the best of him as he grabs them and rages at them, saying, "Don't laugh at me." He doesn't hit them, but he shouts at them and pushes them away before opening the paint can right there in the car park and covering the word up on the side of his van, leading them to drive home in complete silence until there is a phone call from Jamie.
Just wanted to say happy birthday.
Thanks, mate.
Dad, I'm gonna change my plea. Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna plead guilty.
He's no longer claiming to be innocent, and in response to this, his dad is just silent as he continues driving home, leading the mum and sister to pick up and continue the conversation.
Hiya, son. We're here as well.
Hiya, Jay.
Has the food got any better, love? I wrote to them about your intolerances.
You're still in the gym all the time. You're gonna turn into a bodybuilder or something.
It goes back to what Jamie was saying about the football games. Whenever his dad is ashamed of him, he can't look at him. He can't talk to him. He just shuts down. No one in the family has anything to say about him changing his plea to guilty. They don't question it, and they can't face it, showing maybe that some of them had partly already accepted it, that he had done this terrible thing. But still, they shy away from the truth, with the family turning the subject to more trivial things before he again asks for his dad and says,
I'm sorry. And happy birthday.
And hangs up before his dad can even say thank you. We get the sense that this is the moment that the dad finally accepts that his son did it, despite having sat in a police interview and being presented with all of the evidence that we've seen and seeing a video of him doing it. A year later, it's his son's confession that brings it home for him. All the time he's been looking away, and he can't look away anymore as this broken family goes back into the house. We see a mother keeping it together just long enough to get into the house so the neighbors can't see her cry. We see her break as she hangs her jacket up, keeping the place tidy, and gets it together and composes herself again to be there for her husband on his birthday. He is once again trying to look away, putting on his best shirt and acting like they're still going to go to the cinema and get food and continue with their plans for the day. It is up to his wife to be the one to say, let's just leave it and not go to the cinema, to which he then just sits down on the bed in relief and they start to talk about it. The mum brings up the tape, saying, "You saw it, I didn't even see the footage," which is a way of saying, why are you surprised and acting like this moment is the moment that you feel like he did it? You saw him do it.
I saw what I saw. I didn't want to believe it.
They discuss possible reasons for why things happened the way that they did, talking about how Jamie would stay in his room, be up late in the early hours on his computer. Should they have stepped in? Should they have stopped him? Maybe more could have been done.
But I do sometimes think we should have stopped it. seen it and stopped it.
The dad bats it away, saying all kids are like that these days, it can't be helped, but makes his own reference to when he scrolls on his phone that he has videos popping up of men talking about how to treat women, a reference to how the algorithms of Twitter, TikTok, Instagram and YouTube serve this kind of toxic content to young men, and how you could end up going down the rabbit hole very, very easily.
When I was his age, my dad used to batter me. Sometimes he'd take the belt to me and he'd whack me, and he'd whack me.
Jamie's dad talks about how his father used to beat him, that he swore he would never do that to his kids, and that he never did. He never hit them.
I said, when I had my own kids, I'd never do that. And I didn't, did I? I just wanted to be better. But am I? I'm not better.
You tried to be.
But while we know that he never hit them, he did always look away. In those moments where maybe another dad might have flown off the handle and their temper got the best of them and they hit their kid, this is a dad who instead chose to swallow his rage and look away. But we know that that in itself still had devastating effects. With Eddie bringing up his side of the football story, that all of the other dads were laughing at Jamie and how he couldn't look at his own son. We know that from Jamie's point of view, that story and those moments were probably just as devastating as the beatings that his dad took, because he felt like his dad was completely ashamed of him. Through the end of this episode, we're watching two parents spin their wheels and look for answers as to how, what and who turned their child into someone capable of doing this terrible thing. Finally saying, should we have done more?
I think it'd be good if we accepted that maybe we should have done.
When the sister comes up, the idea of moving is brought up, but she says it'll just be better for a bit, then people will find out, and it'll be worse again. As the family decides that they're going to stay here and not run away, because they just know that wherever they go, this is going to follow them, before deciding to go downstairs and finally have that breakfast that was cooking at the start of the episode. But before they do, the dad turns to the mum and says,
How did we make it, Eddie?
Same way we made him.
The same way that we made him. Just a reference to how messed up all of this is, and that they raised her in the same way, but all of these outside forces, all of these things just happened to coalesce in Jamie to create him into the person that he is that did that terrible thing. There is no solid why, there is no silver bullet, there is no magical answer that sums up everything. It is everything all together and at once that made this happen. And the show ends with the dad going into Jamie's room, and it is the room of a 13-year-old boy, a child. We focus on his dad looking around, still wondering how and why, confronted with the insanity of what literal children are doing to each other as a result of the things that we've seen over these last 4 hours of television. This is a little boy's room, and he never should have done what he did. He sobs and he weeps into his son's bed and tucks in the teddy bear as if it were his own son. The bear not only represents Jamie, but it also represents his childhood. It represents innocence, and it's being put to bed. Eddie apologizes to it and says, I should have done better, and the show ends. So let's get into the explanation. What does the ending mean? What is the show really about? And what happens next for these characters? If you haven't already, now is a great time to hit that like and subscribe to support this channel and to come back for more, as well as letting me know in a comment what you thought of the show. So let's talk about that ending, let's talk about behind the scenes facts, how many takes it took, and things you may have missed or didn't know from this show. I've got quotes from the writers and creators as to why they made this show, what they think the answer is, and what messages they were trying to get across. I'll tell you what the ending used to be, why it changed, and also the true stories that inspired the writers of this show to create it in the first place. So how many takes did each episode actually take before they got it right? Netflix planned to film every episode 10 times and then use the best take that they got. But some ended up being filmed more than others. Every episode was rehearsed a lot before filming, and then when recording, they would only be able to do 2 takes a day because of how many things had to be reset to go again. The first episode they filmed was actually episode 3 with the psychologist, and that took 11 attempts, and it's the 11th attempt that you see on Netflix. Episode 1, it's the second take that they filmed of the 10. Episode 2 in the school took 13 attempts, and the final episode was the 16th take that they had done. And before we really get into the ending explained, let's talk about where the murder weapon is, because this is one of the mysteries of the show that isn't going to be answered by the writers, but I think I know where it is. We need to go back right to the beginning and talk about that rip in the wallpaper. And I think there is some symbolism at play here as well as a potential revelation. First of all, it is a very childish wallpaper with a deep rip in it. This is not a coincidence. It's right there staring at us in the initial shots of the show and the final shot of the show. If they didn't want it to be that way, it would have been repaired. It is symbolic of the tear in this young boy's childhood, how something innocent is torn. I also wonder if it is perhaps a clue to where the murder weapon is hidden, a thin kitchen knife. This is a mystery that is left up in the air, the location of the weapon, because the police never find it. In this first scene, I feel like Jamie's hand is unconsciously trying to cover the rip, as you see here. He's got a gun pointed on him and his hand should be high in the air, but his hand keeps reaching for this rip, trying to sort of push it up back against the wall. It's my completely unproven theory that he slid the knife behind the wallpaper through this tear, and the rip is that it's hiding forever in his childish bedroom wallpaper. The rip is so prominent, and the symbolism of it hiding behind this innocent children's wallpaper is exactly the kind of thing I would expect from this writer and from this show. But what do you think? Is it there, or where is it? Let me know in a comment. Some viewers have pointed out that the rip in the wallpaper is even shaped similar to a knife, and in this shot it even looks like Jamie is literally holding the knife whilst being arrested. One other potential hiding spot and location for the murder weapon that I've figured out is the school. There's some dialogue that you might have missed that I picked up on my second time watching. Detective Bascom says that the security cameras show that he walked past the school and it was too dark for them to really see what he was doing there at night. Is it possible that he hid it in the school somewhere? And also, let's consider that fire alarm being set off whilst the police are there investigating. What are the chances of that happening? Now, in British public schools, sometimes fire alarms do get set off, but whilst the police are there, it's a bit of a coincidence. I think it's possible that either Ryan or Tommy might have set off the fire alarm to interrupt the investigation and stop them from finding the murder weapon. We know that Ryan gave Jamie the knife, so he'd be doing everything in his power to stop the police from finding it and linking it back to him, even though he does confess it later. We'll never know for sure, and I'm sure more theories will come out about where it is. Okay, so let's get into the ending explained, what the ending used to be, and what key themes that the writers were trying to bring up, and what they think the solution to all of this is. It's really important to compare the ending and the regret that the parents have with the end of episode 2. Detective Bascom electing to spend more time with his son, who is having similar difficulties at school, perhaps catching it early enough and nipping it in the bud, while Eddie during his conversation regrets that he had to work more and was no longer home playing FIFA, connecting with his son. Bascom, who has been absent up to this point, we see making an active choice to be there for his son and to engage with him, while we see Eddie and the mum regret not being there more, showing a parent's responsibility to their kid and wishing that they had been more active in trying to combat what's happened. It's a nod to show the need for men and fathers specifically to step up and step into the hard conversations, to engage with their sons and young men to prevent this from happening. So what are the true stories behind the show? Stephen Graham, who plays the dad and co-wrote and created the story, said he was inspired to do so after hearing news reports of young boys killing young girls up and down the country. Is this show about Andrew Tate and the effect of him and people like him? Of course, this is a big part of the show and a big part of the problem and the culture with young men and young boys in particular, with toxic masculinity and the podcasts that focus on that kind of thing. But the writer has said it's actually not about that it shouldn't be given as a root cause, because what these boys are subjected to and exposed to is actually far more dangerous than someone like Andrew Tate. And that is a terrifying thought. The writer, Jack Thorne, said it was far from just Andrew Tate. It was not those big guns of the manosphere. It was the smaller blogs and vlogs and the little bits like people talking about a video game, but then explaining through that video game why women hate you. That was the stuff I found most disturbing. He said, "It's not just about pointing the finger at incel culture. I really hope this is a drama that suggests that Jamie is like this because of a number of complicated factors. And as we've pointed out for the last 30 minutes, that is definitely what it achieved." He went on to say he's this vulnerable kid. He hears this stuff which makes sense to him about why he's isolated, why he's alone, why he doesn't belong, and he ingests it. He doesn't have the filter to understand what's appropriate. I know that this isn't necessarily what this video should be about, but it's what the show is about, and it is something that we have to deal with sooner rather than later because people are losing their lives over it. It's a very complex and big issue, and I'm really grateful that a show like this exists that is starting the conversation. And if you've made it this far into this video, I think you probably care enough to be a part of that conversation. So hopefully we can continue to try to make a difference in even just small ways by being positive influences for those around us. Because at the end of the day, our women and our young girls deserve better than this, and so do the young boys and the men who are going down this path. Did you know that there was a different ending? The show was supposed to end in a slightly different way. So what was that secret ending, and why was it changed? Originally, the show ended with Eddie climbing into Jamie's bed and pulling the covers over himself. In the words of the people who wrote the show, making himself into an avatar for his son who is locked away for a very long time, hiding away from the world in this childish room. But it was actually Stephen Graham, the co-creator and writer and who plays Eddie, who decided to take it a different route and started tucking the bear in instead and talking to the bear. It was also not in the script for him to say, "I should have done better" when he walked away. This just happened as improv on that take that they used. What do you think about the ending? I actually really like the tucking in of the teddy bear way more than I would like the idea of the dad climbing into the bed and pulling the covers over him. I think the teddy bear ending is much more beautiful and poignant. Let me know what you think in a comment. Lots of people are very upset with the ending and think that it should have gone into more detail about what happens next, so let's get into it. Where do these characters end up? Well, that is not the point of the show, is the answer to that, and the writers have said that they didn't want to continue on and show the court case because then they would be getting into a lot more murky territory where they would have to be showing the victim's family in the court, cutting to them, and that wasn't the story that they wanted to tell. They're not trying to tell a crime drama or a whodunit or a court case. They're trying to examine what is going wrong with young boys and men. But what we do know is that Jamie is changing his plea to guilty and he will be going away for a very long time, serving the initial part of his sentence in a juvenile offenders, which is for people who are not yet adults, and then being transferred to prison later on. We also know that his family are deciding not to move, instead staying where they are, facing the abuse and harassment they've been suffering, and hoping they can stay together. We know that his mum and dad are having trouble in the relationship, and they say, "We've got to get through this together. We've been together for so long," so they're going to be working on their marriage. Jamie's sister wants to stay put and try to build a life for herself in this area as well, so we know that she's not going anywhere. And as we went into before, we know that Bascom is trying to reconnect with his kid after being an absent father. We know that Ryan is at home. He's not in prison whilst awaiting his trial, so he'll probably get a pretty short sentence, if a sentence at all, for supplying the knife. And when you think about it, that's pretty much all of the characters that we meet that anyone could be interested in the future of. As for Jamie's future and how he's going to get on in prison, things do not look good for him. In episode 3, we see that he's already been having fights in the training center. It's the psychologist asks after the incident, and we just see Jamie beating on another kid in this place. We can make the assumption that with his temper and the prison environment, whenever he's of age, even in the institutions when he's younger, it might not end well for him. The importance of Jamie's fear of needles. In episode 1, we are, until the final scene's gut punch, being made to feel protective of and sorry for Jamie. It made a really big point of the fact that he doesn't like needles, and we see him being comforted and consoled through getting his blood taken for a test. But when you know what you know by the end of this show, this takes on a kind of different feeling. He stabbed a girl over and over without mercy, and it makes the nurse comforting him, telling him just a short, sharp scratch before she puts a little needle in him, seem almost absurd. To put it a different way, we're being shown a little boy who is scared of needles is also someone who is capable of doing the very extreme other end of that spectrum. Being scared of being stabbed with a little needle, but he stabbed someone viciously to death. Something quite interesting to the show, but sad for real life, has been happening since the show has aired, where one of the two writers and co-creators, Jack Thorne, has been suffering abuse online. He co-wrote and created this with Stephen Graham, and since it's come out, people have been tweeting his picture, saying, is he even a man? Does he have too much estrogen? Drumming up this kind of online hate mob against him, bringing up unrelated things like religion, accusing him of being Jewish, but he isn't, and blaming him as being part of this anti-man rhetoric. Once again showing us how online is just terrible for men and how they're so fragile when challenged or put under a spotlight for inadequacies, even as respectfully as it's done in this show in a way that's about helping men. It's a very male-centered show about a male problem and that is affecting women and young girls, and still the men have an issue with it and want to try and tear it down and say that it's propaganda. They can't look at themselves in the mirror. It's really sad, but it's interesting to see that happen and almost prove the point of the show less than a week after it's come out. I think Adolescence is a really, really important piece of work, and it does so without pandering or talking down to its audience. It's not trying to demonize anyone. It also does not offer answers or where to point your finger to blame. It asks questions, it probes, and it's beckoning you to sit down with it and have a conversation, to think about it. People who dismiss this show as somehow woke or blaming men are so beyond missing the point. It's in fact one of the best pieces of media we've ever had on this important subject in a way that is very open and honest and real and kind of respectful and kind to the man's point of view on it. The point that some people are missing is that it's not just about trying to protect young girls and women from the men who are led down this evil path. That in and of itself should be enough. We should be protecting our women, we should be protecting our young girls, but it's also about protecting young boys and men from taking that path. But even putting that issue to the side for 1 minute if you can, I think it's on its own one of the best things Netflix has ever done from a technical standpoint, from the acting and the artistry involved. Everyone should give this show a watch. It is simply brilliant. And that is Adolescence Explained. I could honestly talk about this show for hours, but I've got to close this video out at some point because this has been a long record and a long edit awaits me. But thank you so much for watching. Please do continue the conversation in the comments. This is my movie club, so we talk about the movies a bit like a book club, so go ahead and join in below and keep it kind and keep it respectful. If you'd like to go and watch something else with me right now, maybe something to cleanse the palate after this heavy one, click one of those videos on the screen, or check out my gaming channel for some cozy gaming times, or my podcast. I'll tuck you in just like that bear and read you a bedtime story rather than cry on your forehead. You can find me at Down to Sleep everywhere you get podcasts and with 2 channels on YouTube. Find all of the links that you need in the description below. But thank you so much for being here. Please do hit that like and subscribe before you head out, and I will see you in the next one. And until next time, thank you for watching, and good night.